Kayling Wald kept her husband for 6 months, waiting for his resurrection. Peter Wald was a profoundly religious father and husband. In fact, Wald believed in God so firmly that when he found out he had diabetes, he relied on praying instead of medical care. Wald ended up with a foot infection in March 2014 and ended up dying from it. Instead of having a funeral for her husband, Kayling Wald felt she should keep her husband around in case of a resurrection. Wald was placed in an upstairs bedroom of their home, which Kayling sealed off to prevent the decomposing odor from spreading throughout the house. Wald remained in the upstairs bedroom until 6 months later, when his badly decomposed body, half eaten by rodents, was discovered by a sheriff. The sheriff was at the home to serve an eviction notice to the Wald family. Kayling Wald received 18 months probation for Canada's Coroner's Act charges, failing to notify authorities after one's death. 9-year-old boy keeps his mother's corpse for a month, fearing he'd be sent to a foster home. In November of 1999, 30-year-old Crystal Wells died in her apartment from a tumor in her lungs. Wells's 9-year-old son, Travis Butler, discovered his mother's body, but did not contact anyone about it, fearing he would be sent to a foster home. Instead, Butler kept his mother's corpse on the floor of their Memphis, Tennessee apartment. He covered her with a coat and her face covered with notebook paper, and then continued with his life. Butler kept going to school, did his homework, and even went grocery shopping with money he found in the home. It wasn't until a month later, when family friends Dorothy and Nathaniel Jeffries came by to check on Wells, that her corpse was found, and Butler explained why no one was contacted. The Jeffries received custody of the young boy, and citizens from around the world have donated to a trust fund for Butler, set up by Memphis residents. Robert James Kufler lived with his dead mom and brother for a year. Robert James Kufler, a 60-year-old man from Minnesota, lived in his home for a full year with the corpses of his mother and twin brother. The bodies were discovered after a concerned neighbor reported that the grass was growing high on the property and that they did not see anyone coming to or leaving the house. In a news interview, Kufler reported that his twin brother had died, and a few months later, in August 2015, his 94-year-old mother died as well. Both mother and son were said to have died of natural causes. When asked why he kept the corpses of his family members, Kufler said he was traumatized by their deaths and couldn't bring himself to call authorities. When police entered the home, they found Evelyn Kufler's skeleton and the mummified body of Richard Kufler. Robert was charged with interference of a dead body for moving his brother's corpse. Levan has slept beside his dead wife for years. A Quang Nam, Vietnam man. Levan weed his wife through an arranged marriage. The couple serendipitously fell in love and lived a happy life together, having 7 children. While Van was at work in February 2003, he received a phone call informing him of his wife's passing. By the time Van arrived home, his wife was already being buried. For nearly 2 years, Van slept on top of his wife's grave until he decided he was still not close enough. He planned to dig a tunnel and make his way to his wife's corpse so he could actually sleep with her body against his. His children found out and banned him from going to the cemetery where their mother was buried. Months later, Van created a statue with the use of plaster and cement, snuck over to the cemetery and dug up his wife and put her remains inside of the home, made figure. He then took the statue home with him. Van dresses the statue every day and even applies makeup to it, wanting to keep his wife beautiful. A man kept his dad's body for 5 months to collect benefits. When 29-year-old Christopher Blackburn discovered his father died in March 2012, in the home they shared in Penwortham, Lancashire. He didn't tell anyone about it. Instead, Blackburn left his father's corpse in his bed and began collecting his benefit payments. Blackburn continued to collect his father's monthly checks for 5 months before police discovered his father's body. When doing a wellness check, Blackburn's 10-year-old daughter also lived in the home with her father and was told that her grandfather was just sleeping. Blackburn received a 3-year jail sentence for his crimes. Joni Bakaradze died 20 years ago, but his family preserved his corpse so his son could see his face. Joni Bakaradze died in Georgia, the country, when he was 22 years old, instead of a burial service. His mother decided to preserve his body using balsam sap and vodka and kept him in a casket in the home, which had a viewing window over his face. Bakaradze's mother, Siurik Kvaratskhelia, explained the reason she decided on this unorthodox practice was so Bakaradze's young son could still see his dad and know what kind of person he was. Akskvaria has kept her son's mummified corpse on display in her home for 20 years. A woman slept with her decomposed husband's corpse for a year. 79-year-old Marcel of Liège, Belgium, died from an asthma attack in November 2012. His widow was so distraught about his death that she decided to carry on as though her husband was still living. The wife never reported his death and continued sleeping with his decaying corpse for an entire year. The widow would have probably still been sleeping with her husband's corpse had the police not been called to the apartment by their landlord due to non-payment in November 2013. By the time authorities discovered Marcel, he was completely mummified. Patrick Lara kept his uncle's corpse while using the dead man's app card. 45-year-old Patrick Lara lived with his uncle, Adrian Lugo, in Merced, California. Relatives of the men became concerned when Laura began making excuses for family members not to visit the home. One relative had heard enough excuses and in February 2011 decided to make a surprise visit. Once at the residence, the visiting relative flagged down a police officer, telling the cop that they believed 63-year-old Lugo was in the house and wanted to check on him. Police entered the home and discovered Lugo's dead body, which had been in the home for at least a month. Lara stayed in the house with his uncle's corpse, using his ATM card to support his gambling habit. Lara is in jail on a $175,000 bail and is being charged with elder abuse, theft, and suspicion of involuntary manslaughter. A man kept his mother's corpse for 10 years until his death, when both were discovered. Neighbors were continuously making complaints at a Buenos Aires apartment building due to a horrible smell in the building. In January 2014, police and firefighters entered the apartment building to try to locate the cause of the odor. What they discovered were the corpses of 2 people. One of the corpses was that of 58-year-old Claudio Alfari, who had been dead for approximately a month. The other body, which was dried out and wrapped in plastic bags, was Alfari's mother, Margarita Amer de Alfari. Alfari's mother had been dead for at least 10 years when she was found. Both mother and son appear to have died of natural causes. Linda Waldman kept her sister's corpse for a year. Elderly sisters, Linda Waldman and Hope Wheaton, lived together in a Brookline, Massachusetts, home they grew up in and stayed with an estimated worth of $1, 2 cents million. The sisters were fairly reclusive and were rarely seen out in public, preferring to stay inside their home. A relative of the women came to visit one day in December 2016 and was shocked to discover Wheaton's corpse on the kitchen floor. Police believed Wheaton had been dead for approximately a year and a half. The police made many wellness checks at the house over the past year, and Waldman always told officers that she was fine, but never allowed the police to enter the home. It is unclear why Waldman did not report the death of her sister, but some assume it was because the women were hoarders and did not want anyone to know. There were no charges filed against Waldman, and it is believed Wheaton died of natural causes.